If you're just now tuning in, we did not launch today. We did have a scrub because of weather. But as we were saying, we are looking forward to trying this again on Saturday. Our launch time on Saturday will be another instantaneous window, so we'll have to have the weather cooperate again. And that launch time will be at 3:22 p.m. Eastern. I think our last weather update put us at about 40% probability of violation. John I can check me real quick.
Yeah, Dan, what I saw coming out of the Air Force was 40% probability of violation, I believe. It's always tough because they report in terms of violation, and the optimists have to subtract that from 100% to go, hey, 60% chance, I'll plan my picnic. We were listening, the SpaceX launch director, Mike Taylor, was talking to the launch weather officer asking about the 3 criteria that scrubbed us today. It sounds like in another minute or two, the lightning and the attached anvil cloud rules will clear. The field mill rule, charge in the atmosphere, is still bouncing around, and so, hey, we may need several more minutes before that one would clear. So we'd need even longer than 10 minutes in the window today, it looks like, for all the rules to clear. That brings up what I wanted to mention a little while ago. I got lost listening to the weather brief. But there are a lot of folks who are going, why an instantaneous launch window for Falcon 9 and Dragon? Now, typically when we go to the space station, when we do the mission planning, it's an instantaneous window. There may be enough performance in the rocket to launch somewhere in a 5-minute period, but you've got to pick a time in there. But in the case of Falcon 9, once we start propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes, it doesn't matter so much if you can move 5 or 10 minutes left or right, because the whole sequence is scripted. We do the flight analysis assuming that the temperatures of the propellants are below a certain amount so that we know how much performance is available to the rocket, how much margin we're going to have. So essentially, if you start the countdown, 4 hours, 8 hours out like we were doing today, and you have a very short window, once you get into propellant loading at T-minus 35 minutes, you have to go as soon as you get to 0. We don't have the ability to stop the countdown, wait 5 minutes. Now all of a sudden the liquid oxygen starts warming up from 340 degrees below 0 in the ground system, and that changes how much performance you get carrying into orbit, and we don't want to cut into those margins. Now, if we had had something like a 4-hour window, which some communication satellites have, we could actually get down to almost 0, hold the count, detank the Falcon 9, wait a while, it takes us about an hour and a half, reload a whole new batch of cold liquid oxygen and fuel from the big storage tank that we've got there at Pad 39A, and try to launch again. But in that case, you have to be able to launch, about an hour and a half or so later after you scrub. And in the case of the International Space Station, an hour and a half from now, it's nowhere near where we need to be to get to orbit with the performance of the Falcon 9 and the Dragon. So today, it's a combination. We start the day with a 1-second window.
Yeah, just informing you, it's
but
been
once
2
we
hours,
get
30
inside of 35 minutes, it becomes an instantaneous window for the Falcon 9, regardless of what the customer may be able to give us. So there's a little explanation for folks who are wondering why we have such a tight window.
Okay,
right now, it looks like we are bringing the last bits of fuel off of the stage, and liquid oxygen is just about off of the stage. So things are clocking right along per the 40-minute timeline. Everything looks good, and we'll wait to hear that we're clear, and then when we get the call for Bob and Doug to go ahead and disarm launch escape system, and the crew access arm will watch come back out, center itself around the Dragon hatch, and then the ingress team will go up there and open the hatch.
Thank you for the science lesson, John I.
Hey, no charge.
Much appreciated.
We did hear a quick call to the crew there. We should be just under 10 minutes away from that prop offload completing. It looks like we're just tracking
Stage 2
the RP1
fuel offload is complete.
And there we have the confirmation. Stage 2 offload's complete. And we should have now just the RP1, so that densified propellant, or the RP1 is kerosene. We should be under 10%, a little under 10 minutes until that's off. and then we'll step through those events we were discussing where they'll be able to disarm the launch escape system, get the arm back out there, and Bob and Doug can begin to exit the Dragon spacecraft. Still not the friendliest skies in the background.
That is Florida, though. The weather is constantly changing over there, which is why we always have to keep an eye on it through every single launch that we have out there. Bob and Doug are patiently waiting. As you can see, that is a live view of them on the Crew Dragon vehicle as they're waiting prop offload to complete. Second stage prop offload is complete. We are just waiting on first stage to complete.
Stage 1 LOX offload is complete. Waiting on stage 1 fuel in roughly 5 minutes or so.
And again, the launch escape system is still armed. We are waiting for a prop offload to complete before they disarm that, and then they will be able to egress from the Crew Dragon vehicle.
And we just heard we should be just under 5 minutes away from the last of that fuel coming out of the Falcon 9 first stage. And then we'll see those events start to pick back up, and we'll see the crew arm swing back out. They've been in those seats for a couple hours now. They typically get inside of Dragon a little over 2.5 hours ahead of launch. So they've been strapped into these seats for quite a while. They are custom sized though, so they're as comfortable and as snug as possible. Obviously, since they're going to be in them for a really long time, but most importantly, when you're doing that splashdown at the very end of the mission, it's your car seat, and splashing down or landing on land is not the most gentle of procedures in a capsule. So just really making sure that they're snug inside of that Dragon capsule. But we should be a little under 5 minutes away from the prop offload being completed.
And as Dan mentioned, those suits are custom made, but the seats are also custom fit for each astronaut as well. They do remain on Crew Dragon for this mission for almost 24 hours about. So we do want to make sure that they are comfortable and make sure that the suits and the seats are comfortable enough for them to stay in that position for a while. I believe when they get into orbit, they are allowed to get out of their seats and get a little bit more comfortable, but it's a long ride for them.
Yeah, once they do get on orbit, they are able to get out of the seats and actually out of their suits too, since for this flight path today, it was going to take them about 19 hours. So Bob and Doug would actually have had about 8 hours to sleep on board the Dragon capsule. So we weren't able to launch today, though. The rendezvous on Saturday should be very similar to what we would have had if we launched today, where it'll take them about 19 hours to get to the International Space Station. So they'll launch, and they'll have a number of different events that we'll be able to walk you through, including manual piloting of Dragon and just really putting the spacecraft through all of the paces before it arrives at the International Space Station. Because, again, this is a test flight. And this is this last test before we certify the Dragon spacecraft for regular crewed flights, which will just be bringing up those long duration, 6-month, maybe even a year-long missions.
Right. And it should be a very exciting test flight because it's pretty much like an actual mission. When Bob and Doug get on the station, they will be performing some research while they're up there and performing tests and doing some final things for this demonstration mission.
Yeah, but I mean, just for right now, we are just going to continue to stay with them until we see them come out of Dragon, because the launch escape system's still armed while we wait for this propellant offload to complete. That's just done as a safety measure. Anytime you have rocket propellants beneath you, you want to make sure that we have a good way for them to get out of the way. And so we should be within just a couple of minutes for that final bit of RP1 coming off the first stage. And then we'll hear the crew get the go to disarm that launch escape system. We'll see the crew access arm swing back in. But if you're just tuning in, expecting them to be in space, we did have a scrub today due to weather. Our next launch attempt is going to be this Saturday, May 30th at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time. And just like we did today, we're going to be bringing you every single step of the way. It's going to look a little familiar if you watched all of today's, but it's going to be just as exciting.
I can imagine it might even be more exciting with all the anticipation that we've hyped this launch up for with already going through it all today. But again, the more practice we have, the better off we will be. Hopefully next launch attempt, we will have a flawless launch and actually be able to lift off with good weather.
Yeah, weather is going to be the big thing that we'll continue to watch. That was the culprit today for our scrub. And our initial weather reports already looking at about a 40% probability of violation. So as John and I was saying, the optimists in us have to say that's 60% good. So we're going to look at the good side of this. And that's roughly what we were in the days leading up to this. We won't have a rogue tropical storm forming off of South Carolina on us on Saturday, but Florida weather will always be dynamic, so we'll just continue to track and hopefully get a good chance hit that window on Saturday.
And just a reminder, everything else on the vehicle and for the mission was looking good today. It was just the weather, which, as John Aya said earlier, and Lauren even referred to him mentioning this, weather is the one thing that we actually cannot control on our missions. So unfortunately, it did cause us to scrub today, but the vehicles are healthy. Bob and Doug were ready. And they should be ready to go again with the next launch attempt on Saturday.
Just looking at our data, it looks like that RP1 is just about all out. So we'll just kind of stand by for a few more moments. Hopefully we get that call soon, John I.
Yeah, I was going to, while we're waiting to hear the call, that the last percentage of fuel is off. I was going to comment on Jesse's discussion about it was just the weather. I think during this countdown, there were more words said about the weather than everything else.
Uh-huh.
I'm listening right now to a weather discussion in the background.
Yeah, and again, for people wondering if we knew that we did have bad weather, even from this morning. Again, we do monitor this all the way down to the final minutes of the countdown. And with Florida weather being pretty sporadic, sometimes we have even hurricanes coming through or bad weather coming through and passing 20 minutes later and having good weather for a launch. So this is why we continued to attempt to launch today, but unfortunately for T0 today, weather was not on our side.
Yeah, and Jesse, this is John again. I dropped off to listen to a weather discussion. They were just giving the times. The lightning rule went green, so we could have gone without a lightning concern. The attached anvil rule cleared, but the field mill rule is expected to clear at 58 minutes after the hour. So that's another 4.5 minutes from now. So we were close, but we needed about 25 minutes later launch time. It does remind me, at risk of offending some people, but the old saying that says it's better to be on the ground wishing you were flying than flying wishing you were on the ground.
Yes, definitely. Safety first, always, and making sure that when Bob and Doug do fly, they are flying safely and as planned. So again, this is standard procedure for us to make sure that they do have a safe flight to the International Space Station.
All right, well, for now, we're just continuing to stand by, expecting the call that all of that prop has now been offloaded from Falcon 9.
All right, venting vehicle tanks to nominal TPC set points for crew ingress.
At this moment, the launch escape system still armed. Once the prop offload is complete, that'll be the next step in our procedures to have Bob and Doug begin to make their way out of Dragon.
LD, countdown 1. LD. We have the prompt here for nominal crew egress
Okay, so we're ready for launch escape system disarm.
As affirmed, ready for launch escape disarm.
MD copies. You guys are ready?
Yeah, launch team's ready. Go ahead and advise the crew.
Hey, Dragon SpaceX, you copied that discussion. So with that, you are go for disarming launch escape system per section 2 of 5.100.
We'll put that in work. Section 2, disarming the launch escape system.
All right, that was the call we were waiting for, propelling off of Falcon 9. So Doug Hurley, Bob Ankin now going to disarm the launch escape system on Dragon. And once that's disarmed, those 8 Super Draco engines will be out of the mix.
SpaceX Dragon launch escape system has been disarmed into Alpha Decimal 3.
Copy that. We concur.
And showing then confirmed the launch escape system has been disarmed.
And Dragon SpaceX, with that confirmation, you are go to open your visors and proceed to section 3.
Okay, we'll open the visors and go to section 3.
As you heard and you can see, Bob and Doug can now open their visors and get ready for exiting the vehicle. Again, they kept their visors on while the launch escape system was armed, while prop offloading was continuing. And that is just to make sure that they are safe. Now that there is no more propellant on any of the vehicles, they are safe to have disarmed the launch escape system and now are getting ready for that crew arm to swing back, the hatch to open, and for them to egress.
SpaceX Dragon with an update. We're holding in 3.4 and we're ready for seat rotation when you are.
Copy that. We'll wait for the closeout team to open the hatch and verify clearance, and then we can execute seat rotation.
Dragon cap.
And there's that crew arm swinging back
started.
towards Dragon. Once that crew arm is in place, they will be able to open the hatch on Crew Dragon. Bob and Doug's seats will rotate back out of launch position so that they can safely get out of their seats and egress the vehicle.
And we heard they'll have what they call nominal egress, so just the normal procedures for getting them out of the capsule. That means the same closeout team that was there to get them in will be able to assist as they come out. They'll arrive and get that hatch open, and then they'll be able to rotate the seats. That'll rotate Bob and Doug pretty much forward, where they'll be into the original position that the seats were configured when they made their way into Dragon. It just gets them a little bit out and under the displays and makes getting in and out of the capsule a little bit easier. They've been in those seats for about 3 hours at this point, so definitely a long day for the crew. As they woke up about 6 hours prior to our T-0, had their breakfast, which we confirmed was steak and eggs, at least for Doug Hurley. And then they proceeded through all of the suit up and the trip to the pad, making their way inside Dragon, where they've been for about the last 3 hours at this point. We were on track for an on-time liftoff right at 4:33 p.m. Eastern Time, but did have to scrub a little under 17 minutes before launch due to weather. So for now, we've offloaded all of the propellant off of Falcon 9. The launch escape system has been disarmed. That crew access arm is back right up next to Dragon, as you can see in that view on the left. Pretty soon we'll see the teams arrive to get the hatch open, get Bob and Doug out, and they'll make their way back to crew quarters and their quarantine. It is important to note that throughout the entire process of them getting into Dragon, suiting up all of those different steps, they maintain that same quarantine that they've been in since for about 2 weeks now. And that is specifically for events like today, where we have to scrub and just go to another day. So we don't want to break that quarantine once we're putting them into that launch vehicle. And that's a standard quarantine that we have for any crew members flying to the International Space Station. The current COVID-19 pandemic obviously puts a little bit of extra pressure and a little bit of an extra spotlight on that, but they're following a lot of the same procedures that we have in place just to keep crew members healthy before they go and spend several months in space in an enclosed environment with just a couple of other people.
Right, and it's a little bit more difficult to get them help on the space station, right? So we want to make sure that when they do head up to the space station, that they are fully healthy. So this, again, is standard procedure, not just because of this pandemic.